Trump administration making it clear they're launching this new crackdown on immigration in Chicago. They call it Operation Midway Blitz.
President Trump has been vowing a crackdown in Chicago for weeks and weighing whether to send in the National Guard to combat what he calls out-of-control crime.
The Trump administration is launching what it calls Operation Midway Blitz. The White House says it's going after what it calls the worst of the worst criminals who are here in the country illegally.
More than 900 people have been arrested so far during Operation Midway Blitz in Illinois, according to the Department of Homeland Security.
According to the Department of Homeland Security, they're saying that Operation Midway Blitz, since it launched about 2 weeks ago, has detained over 400 folks.
ICE arrested 1,361 people living in the Houston area.
It was just past 3 a.m. on September 30 when the quiet streets of Chicago's South Shore neighborhood erupted into chaos. Darkness blanketed the city as the rhythmic thud of helicopter blades broke the silence. Residents stirred from their sleep to see the glowing Black Hawk helicopter hovering low above their homes. Below, unmarked vans and armored vehicles filled the narrow parking lots while tactical teams from the FBI, U.S. Border Patrol, ICE, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives fanned out in coordinated formation. What began as a silent night turned into a full-scale federal raid. By dawn, 37 people had been arrested in the dramatic operation, which was part of a sweeping federal campaign known as Operation Midway Blitz. Officials later confirmed that the targeted apartment complex was believed to be frequented by members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua and their associates. The raid, which used military-style tactics more often seen in war zones than residential neighborhoods, left a deep mark on South Shore, both physically and emotionally. Residents described the night as nothing short of terrifying. With the way agents descend from the helicopter by rope and detain people outside for hours, with their hands zip-tied behind their backs as floodlights illuminated the building. Inside the apartments, chaos was the order. Windows shattered during forced entries, and flashbangs echoed through the halls. Families huddled on the floor as heavily armed agents swept from room to room. When the operation ended, the building bore the scars of the raid. Broken glass, overturned furniture, and hallways littered with debris. Clothing and children's toys lay scattered beside plastic bags and broken lamps. It looked less like an apartment complex and more like the aftermath of a battlefield. According to the Department of Homeland Security, most of those arrested were undocumented immigrants. Of the 37 detainees, 2 were identified as confirmed members of Tren de Aragua, a violent Venezuelan criminal organization known for extortion, smuggling, and drug trafficking across Latin America. Another 7 had prior criminal histories, including aggravated battery and possession of controlled substances. The remaining 28 were detained for immigration violations. Agents also recovered communication radios, forged identification cards, and small quantities of narcotics from several units, items officials described as tools of coordination for cross-border criminal networks. Those without legal immigration status were immediately transferred to federal holding facilities for deportation proceedings. This operation wasn't an isolated event. Over the previous 3 weeks, federal agencies had conducted a series of aggressive raids across the greater Chicago area, resulting in more than 800 arrests since September 8. The government called it a necessary crackdown on gang-affiliated networks operating under the radar in U.S. cities. But for many local residents and community leaders, Operation Midway Blitz looked more like a military occupation than a law enforcement effort. Witnesses described seeing children as young as 6 taken into custody alongside their parents. DHS later confirmed that 4 U.S.-born children, citizens whose parents were undocumented, were placed in temporary care during the operation. One of the children, officials said, was found inside an apartment with a suspected Tren de Aragua member. It all started on the 8th of September 2025, when the U.S. Department of Homeland Security announced the operation intended to target undocumented immigrants with criminal backgrounds. The operation was explicitly triggered by the death of 20-year-old Katie Abraham, who died earlier in the year in a hit-and-run crash. The mission was even framed in her honor. Katie was killed in January near the intersection of Kohler and University Avenues, outside the Carl Foundation Hospital in Urbana, Illinois. The driver, Julio Cuculbol, a Guatemalan national without legal status, was later arrested and charged by Urbana police with leaving the scene of a crash resulting in death, aggravated driving under the influence, resulting in death and reckless homicide. DHS used her case as a symbolic justification, portraying the operation as a response to crimes allegedly enabled by sanctuary-oriented policies. Though publicly presented as a Chicago crackdown, the operation's jurisdiction extends across all of Illinois and adjacent Lake County, Indiana. During its first 9 days, more than 250 arrests were reported. By day 13, DHS claimed nearly 550 people had been arrested in the Chicago area under the operation. According to DHS, many of those apprehended were alleged to be criminal illegal aliens who had come to Illinois believing that the state's sanctuary policies, especially in Cook County and Chicago, would shield them from enforcement. DHS released a list of people it called the worst of the worst undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records who were allegedly freed in Illinois despite ICE requests to detain them. Among them was Gabriel Valle Galvez, 47, from Mexico, a convicted member of the Latin Kings gang. His record includes charges for battery, aggravated assault, and DUI. Another was Javier Carmelo Gomez, 46, also from Mexico, convicted of procuring prostitution, domestic violence, and drug possession, and wanted on an active warrant for manufacturing offenses. Danny Daniel Hernandez Colina, identified as a member of Tren de Aragua, has been repeatedly arrested for burglary and shoplifting. An immigration judge ordered his removal in 2024, but he remained in the country. Carlos Jahendi Gonzalez Montero, another Tren de Aragua member, was charged with reckless conduct, aggravated assault, and armed violence. DHS says Cook County ignored ICE detainers and released him. Finally, Oscar Ramirez Vences, linked to the 2-6 gang, had convictions for aggravated unlawful use of a weapon and domestic battery, yet was also allegedly freed despite ICE's request to hold him. One arrest stood above the rest. Aldo Salazar Bahena was let out in handcuffs in Elgin, Illinois. Authorities say he was not just another name on the list, but the alleged leader divided by enforcer of the Larazzo Street Gang, with ties reaching from suburban Chicago into deeper networks operating across Illinois and possibly beyond. Prosecutors accuse him of involvement in a brutal murder from 2005 when he and other gang members beat 21-year-old Fernando Diaz Jr. to death. Diaz's body was left in a trail near the Fox River. The case, prosecutors say, exemplifies the gang's brutal discipline and their ruthlessness over perceived disrespect. Records show he was released from a maximum security prison in Illinois, despite a long criminal record and deportation order. Yet he slipped back into the streets, rebuilding influence until federal agents closed in under Midway Blitz. To officials, this arrest is evidence that federal enforcement can reach deeply embedded gang figures even when local release policies appear to have let them back onto the streets. Laws are being showcased not just to punish individuals, but to dismantle entire criminal enterprises, deterring others who assume sanctuary policies will shield them. DHS spokespeople revealed that nearly 30% of those taken into ICE custody during the Chicago divided by Illinois phase of the operation already carried criminal records or final orders of removal. The list also includes fugitives wanted nationally or internationally, undocumented individuals with gang or criminal network ties, and persons with domestic violence, weapons, or drug trafficking allegations. In this framing, the Chicago operation becomes part of a broader strategy to show that no safe harbor exists for criminal illegal aliens, even in jurisdictions that resist cooperation with ICE. Yet, alongside the crackdown came a twist in policy debate. Just weeks earlier, congressional Democrats and some federal oversight voices had advanced proposals to relax civil immigration enforcement standards, expand protections for nonviolent immigrants, or reduce penalties for certain immigration infractions, a move many see as softening penalties for low-level violations and shifting federal priorities away from broad enforcement. The contrast raised eyebrows. How can Washington wage war on organized gang violence and criminal illegal aliens while simultaneously advancing softer immigration or civil enforcement policies? Is this a smart way to separate serious crimes from minor ones, or a clear contradiction in federal policy? In a press statement, DHS defended the operation, emphasizing that the illegal immigrants had long been under investigation for harboring foreign gang activity and narcotics operations linked to cartels, which has been expanding its influence across the Americas. Yet, community leaders in Chicago voiced strong concern about the conduct and impact of the raid. Civil rights groups condemned what they called militarized immigration enforcement that endangered residents and traumatized families. They argued that such large-scale raids blur the line between criminal justice and immigration control, inflicting lasting harm on innocent people caught in the crossfire. The debate now sits at the intersection of two growing crises: America's battle against transnational crime and its long-running struggle over immigration policy. Supporters of Trump's strategy see Operation Midway Blitz as proof of his administration's willingness to confront the cartel and gang problem directly, using every available resource, including the military and federal tactical units. Critics, however, view it as an overreach of power that erodes civil liberties and risks escalating tensions between federal agencies and the communities they claim to protect. Was this the price of safety or the crossing of a dangerous new line in America's war on crime? That's the question we're asking tonight.